Hello, and welcome back to the second half of this lecture where we're actually going to look at the organ donation process and some concerns associated with it. Now, as we talked about before, we need to be able to match up an organ donor with an organ recipient so that we're able to get the transplanted tissue or transplanted organ into a patient and help them. So their immune system, the patient's immune system, isn't going to attack the cells, attack the organ, kill it off, and make the patient sicker than what they started. And we talked about the fact that we have to match up the donor and the recipient, and that there's a shortage of organs. We're talking about lots and lots of people on the wait list for an organ. And I think I said in the first half of this lecture, about 20 people die a day waiting for an organ to become available to them. And again, that's an organ that's matched up with their immune system so that they don't have an organ graft failure or kind of rejection of the organ. And so if we take a look at it, why do we have such a shortage? Is there a way that we can kind of address this shortage in some way? And so again, if we take a look at recent statistics, about 95% of the adults within the United States support the idea of organ donation. But if we take a look at it, only about 58% have actually signed up to be organ donors. And so on their driver's license, they may indicate that they wish to be an organ donor or they've signed up in some way. And if we take a look at it, of that, so about 95% support organ donation, just over half have taken a step to being organ donors. Only about 3 out of 1,000 people die in a way that allows for organ donation. If the organs are going to be donated, basically the person that dies or is going to be donating them has to die in a hospital setting or in a situation where the organs sounds harsh, but are relatively fresh, are viable, are still biologically alive, if we want to think about it that way, because you can't transplant dead tissue. You want to transplant live tissue. And so we've got great limits then on the amount of organs that would be potentially available for this process. The next thing is that ethnic minorities make up almost 60% of those currently on the waiting list. And the reason for that, again, is this idea that the molecules that are found on the surface of our cells is going to determine whether or not we're going to be a good match for a potential organ that would be available to us. And so because of that, we've got a disproportion for a lot more minorities being on this list than you would normally expect. They're a kind of smaller percentage of the population, but a higher percentage of the population on these waiting lists. And so if we take a look at the reason for that, is that in general, ethnic minorities make up only a little less than half of the organ donors. And so because of that, because of the need to match these tissues, if we have fewer people with certain kind of molecular markers along their surface donating their tissues, it means it becomes harder to find a tissue that's going to match up with the recipient that they need. So if we take a look at this, again, we've got this huge shortage of organs. We've got different populations within the country and across the world that have a harder time getting an organ because of the availability of organs and the need to match these organs. But if we take a look at it, the average wait time, it sounds like a deli. It's not meant to sound that way, but the average amount of time that a patient waits on a list waiting for an organ, kidneys, almost 2 years, and then a little bit less than a year for things like the heart, the intestine, liver, all these things here. But think about it. If you've got a patient that is sick, they're in kidney failure, they're going into dialysis, so that the machine is kind of replacing the function of the kidney. They may be very, very sick. They may be becoming weaker and weaker, and they may not be able to survive 2 years waiting for a kidney. And so that means that the prognosis then is poor. And so, we've got to come up with a better way of doing this. We got to come up with a better way of matching donors with recipients. Now, if we take a look at this in 1984, in an effort to do this, the United States developed the National Organ Transplant Act. And this established the United Network for Organ Sharing that I think I talked about in the previous half of this lecture. But basically, it's a nationwide computer registry that allows us to find a donor in one location in the United States and make that organ available to somebody outside of their state, potentially. It also provides financial support for the organ procurement organization, the organizations for collecting the donated organs or tissues, because again, there's a lot of ethical issues kind of associated with it. And the National Organ Transplant Act prohibited the buying and selling of organs in the United States. Again, this is a huge, huge, huge ethical issue. Should somebody jump to the front of the line because they're willing to, pay $1 million to get a kidney over somebody that is not in the position of being able to do that? There are huge disparities when we take a look at if we were able to buy and sell organs. It's huge, huge ethical issues to keep in mind. More recently, the National Medicare established conditions for participant legislation. This is the idea that if a hospital has a patient that's coming in that is dying, that is potentially an organ donor or is going to be in a position to donate organs, they have to contact the local organization involved with harvesting these tissues. And basically that organization would then send a trained individual out to talk to the family or talk to the patient if they're cognizant of what's going on, to talk about the potentials of organ donation. You really don't want Dr. Frankenstein coming into the room and saying, hey, I've got a use for your organs when you're done with them. Can I have them? You really need somebody that's trained and kind of being respectful, that can be empathetic with the family as they're going through this very difficult time, and be able to explain the process and the importance of organ donation. You just don't want to, handle this, ham-handedly. You want to, do it right. We take a look at organ donation rates around the world. The United States is looking pretty good on this, but we've still got this incredible wait list, and we've got a huge number of people dying every day because of the lack of organs, but we can take a look at this. In this, the darker color is organ donation from deceased individuals. And so this would be organs coming from a patient that died in the hospital and had their organs collected for potential transplant. The lighter blue is living donation. And so this would be like an individual that has 2 kidneys recognized as a match, and they will donate one of their kidneys to a recipient. Turkey is another one that has a huge number of living organ transplants. So we can see, we're looking pretty good in comparison to the rest of the world, but we still have lots and lots of problems in getting the organs to the people that need it. If we take a look at kind of worldwide, there are 2 primary methods for registering potential organ donors. The first is what we have within the United States. We have an opt-in program. Opt-in means that we have to basically say, okay, I want to be an organ donor, and I give my consent along with my driver's license that say I am interested in being an organ donor. And this is described what over here as an informed consent process. We're assuming that if somebody's going to opt into this program, they've read the brochure that comes along with your driver's license renewal, they understand what it means to be an organ donor, and they're interested in doing it. Some locations, Spain, Australia, many of the countries within the European Union have an opt-out program. And this is an idea that everybody is a potential organ donor unless they take the action to refuse to be refuse to be a donor. They opt out of this program. And so these are going to be these lighter blue columns here where there's presumed consent unless a person has taken an active role in saying that they don't want to be an organ donor. Now, California is going to be an example of a system that makes organ donation a mandatory question on their driver's license. Most of the states, it's a voluntary, you don't have to check off the box either way, but it's available to you. What we see is that each state operates their own organ donation system within the national registry. But what California saw is that a national average was about 40% of the people had opted in, had said that they wanted to be an organ donor. At the time they put this in place, California only had about 28% active organ donor, or at least active interest, or opting in for organ donation. And so their idea was that they make this question mandatory. They require you to think about it. They require you to decide whether you want to opt in and be a potential organ donor, or you want to stay out of the program. And the idea is that this would increase, by making this question mandatory, increase the people that have considered it and potentially increase the number of people that are going to be potential organ donors. 2018, again, if we take a look at these nationwide, or not nationwide, worldwide, we can take a look at it. The ones in green here are the opt-in programs, so United States, Canada, Brazil, Australia, India, looks like Saudi Arabia, some other countries there. You have to intentionally sign up to become an organ donor. All of the countries in blue, so much of Europe, much of the former Soviet Union, Russia, things like that. It's presumed that you want to be involved with the organ donation process unless you've actually taken an action to opt out of it. If we take a look at this, and I just included it because I need to keep the title here, these are solid organ transplants. So these are, like kidney transplant, heart transplants. The darker the color is, the darker color corresponds to increased numbers of organ donations. And so you can see lots of organ donations in the United States, Spain, much of Europe, a little bit less so in Australia and Canada, a little bit less so when we go into Russia, a little bit less so we go into China, and then in other areas like Africa and some of the Pacific Rim islands, fairly low level of solid organ or organ transplants. So if you're interested in becoming an organ donor, and again, I'm not advocating one way or the other for this. My goal is that you understand the process involved, and that you understand this, because we're gonna have an ethical question kind of related to this. To become an organ donor, generally what you need to do is designate the decision on your driver's license when you do a renewal, but that's often not enough. You need to be able to tell your family that this is what you desire in many cases, because for you to donate your organs, even though you've opted into the program, most programs still require that your next of kin, that somebody as your representative, affirms your decision and agrees within the healthcare setting that this is your wish. It's also encouraged that people talk about this with their physician, and I didn't mean to have faith healer, but their minister, stuck in the mindset of healing and medicine. So their faith leader, it should be faith leader, not faith healer. Correct that really quickly. Apologize for that. So their faith leaders, as well as their friends, again, so that you're able to convey what your wishes are. And then if you want to be very, very explicit in your kind of that stage of your life, it's often encouraged that you put in tissue donation or organ donation in the limits in your advance directives, your wills, as well as your living wills. And again, I'm not advocating for this one way or the other. I just want you to be informed because we have the shortage of organs. I want you to be thinking about this in relationship to the ethical questions that we're going to be looking at within this course. And so that finishes up kind of our overview of organ donation. A couple readings associated with this. This is from the US Department of Health and Human Services, partnering with your transplant team, the Patient's Guide to Transplantation. So take a look at it. Talks about the transplant experience, transplantation within the United States. If you're interested, and I've got a lot of readings up here, so I don't want to overwhelm you, but I encourage you, if you are interested in this, read what every patient needs to know on organ transplantation. This is optional, but it's good information to have and to understand. And that's going to finish up what we've got for today. Come back for the assignment in the video. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. Thank you and have a great day.